I'm Ben.
I'm Jen.
This is Philosophy Friday.
Woo!
This is the last Philosophy Friday of Give Them an Argument Season 1. Let me just...
My name on our show. Thank you.
Yeah. We are going to be joined in a bit by our good friend Ryan Lake, who is a philosophy professor. He wrote his doctoral dissertation on free will and determinism. So we thought it'd be good for him to come in and talk to us about that. So Ryan is a little bit held up, though. So what we thought we'd do for like the first half hour or so of this is just do a little Q&A, right? A little... and, you know, all...
Now, is this philosophical Q&A? Is it personal Q&A? There will be no political Q&A.
Yes, this is Philosophy Friday, no politics. But I suppose any other sort of Q&A, you know, is acceptable.
Within reason.
Within reason. So I was assuming philosophical Q&A. But you know, if people want to ask about movies or something, that's fine too.
Oh yeah.
So
books, movies, cats, dogs, whatever you want. No, I just said.
Well, if it's ancient Athens,
people don't listen to me.
Yeah, I would actually. So I don't know who you are, but I still would.
Ben will debate anybody. If he will debate that crazy dude.
Which crazy dude?
The crazy dude.
Oh, Jesse Lee Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The crazy dude. He'll debate anybody.
Yeah. No, I've actually been thinking, you know, since I did that one with not William Craig, that'll be good, but with Douglas Wilson, that it would be, I'd like to do more philosophical debates. So I assume, Arucard, that you're some sort of incompatibilist. So yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That'd be fun.
Hi, kitty.
Yeah. I mean, Molyneux was pretty crazy, but I think she was talking about Jesse Lee Peterson.
I was,
yeah. Have debated a few people who are a little crazy. Lots of people who weren't crazy, but a few people who were a little crazy.
One of my students actually came across Ben by seeing that debate.
Yeah,
she was YouTube. She was like, "Is that your husband?"
I saw him on Jesse Lee Peterson.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah, well, we will be getting into this extensively later in the live stream.
Once Ryan is no longer held up at gunpoint.
Yeah. But I'm a compatibilist. I think that even if we live in
But why are you talking about this now?
Because he asked.
It doesn't matter.
Well, we're doing Q&A.
But not about free will, are we?
Okay. I'm a compatibilist. See the second half of this after Ryan gets here for more about that.
Yeah, my husband is so not a beta man. Take it from me.
Yeah, this is actually something that Jesse Lee Peterson was demanding an answer to. Where does logic come from? Which actually, I guess to give a serious answer to that, if by logic we mean logical validity, you know, one thing following from another. So P, therefore Q. Where does that relationship come from? I'd say, you know, this is not a hot take. But I would say truth preservation. So that if that what that means is that P can't be true without Q being true. So that, you know, if that's what's being asked, where does logic come from? That's the answer. If it's
otherwise, the answer is Aristotle. The correct answer is always Aristotle.
Yeah. If the question is where does the study of logic come from, Aristotle is a decently true answer.
Somebody asked something about Kant or Plato. No, Aristotle.
Wait a second. Where's the Kant or Plato?
Up there.
Yeah. I mean, I think Plato, because yeah, right, like, you know,
Where would we be without Plato? I
yes.
don't know why my eye keeps watering, but it does.
So Alfred Whitehead, who's the guy who co-wrote the Principia Mathematica with Bertrand Russell, famously said that all of Western philosophy was footnotes to Plato, which, you know, which is an exaggeration, but, you know, there's some truth to that. Like, you know, you certainly don't get Kant without Plato, you know, but you certainly could have it the other way around, you know. So so in that sense, I'd say Plato, although, you know, Kant is also super important.
I agree.
Okay, well, in that case, I don't know how much there'd be to debate about, but, you know, we could, you know, if
There's always something.
If we did figure out exactly what the disagreements were, maybe we could still, you know, we could still do one of those. If I ever had to argue for a position I disagreed with, not seriously, you know, because I don't know how that would happen. But
what was that thing that one day that you were yelling so much? You were doing something and you were yelling, and you came out and I was like, Ben, I was like cowering in the living room because Ben was screaming and he was like, oh, I was pretending to defend such and such.
Yeah, because it was on the Surf's Twitch stream. They had me on. They didn't really tell me in advance, you know, I gotta say, you know, what the format was going to be, but they had like a few guests who did lots of debates and stuff to do this kind of game where you had to say before you knew what the question was whether you'd be arguing for or against. And so there were a couple where I had to like defend like super conservative positions. So I just sort of do it in the like as like kind of a as like I did it as a character, you know, as a very yelly character. Like there was you know, so kind of like if people ever seen V for Vendetta, the like conservative, you know, TV host from V for Vendetta, that kind of guy, and so I did so I remember like there was a point where somebody said like said something about I don't even remember what it was that, you know, that they said was going to kill children. I was like, they're probably very low IQ children, you know. So that was how that was.
Yeah, I wasn't hearing any of the words. I just heard Ben yelling and yelling. I was turning up my music louder and louder, trying to drown him out. Does Ben ever debate? No, he's too convinced that he's right to ever have to question it and then go back and forth with himself. That would be my answer.
Well, I don't think I'm always that sure, but I do remember our friend Mark once saying something very similar, that, you know, that Ben will totally change his mind, you know, when you give him good evidence, but right up until the point he changes his mind, he's like certain that he's right. So I don't know. I don't think so, but I guess you two do both perceive it that way.
Do I debate myself?
No. Depends on the incompatibilist. We'll get into it. Let's see.
Yeah, I would say that involves how religious they are and how much they know about the science and, you know, some other stuff that's probably a little farther out of just the.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. If I don't act, it's not like I have polling data or something, but if I had to guess, probably most people who are incompatibilists who still believe in free will are probably mostly religious, like people who, you know, teach in the philosophy department of Christian colleges and stuff. I know not everybody, right? But that would be my guess about the predominant group, you know, people who it's like they have some sort of, you know, they have some kind of extra philosophical reason for thinking that's very important to believe in free will.
So, you know, the painting, the Aristotle and Plato painting, and Plato's pointing up at the sky. So there's one meme where he's got some Play-Doh, and in this hand he's got a plate. So it's Plato with Play-Doh looking at that plate dough. So, yeah, I think it's funny.
Not sure what you're referring to there, Antonio. Although that is funny and does remind me of years and years ago, actually, like I think a few months before we first got together in 2013. I was
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
I was at a conference in Glasgow in Scotland. I did. Sure.
We'll get back to you, Sam.
It was for the 25th anniversary of Graham Priest's book In Contradiction coming out, and I was out with a few other people who were presenting at the conference, including this guy Gareth, who I love because he. So what he was working on was, like he was primarily interested in what are sometimes called revenge paradoxes. Like, so the standard liar paradox says, like, this sentence I'm saying right now is false, and you might try to solve that by saying, well, maybe there's a third truth value. There's true, false, and I don't know, schmaltz. And so a revenge paradox would be if you change it to spike that attempt to solve it. So you change it to like, this sentence I'm saying right now is either true or schmaltz, is either false or schmaltz, right? Then you have the original problem, and that doesn't help. So it's great because Gareth has this like really thick Glaswegian accent. So I'm not going to try to do it, but like the effect of that accent when he said, yes, my research interests primarily concern revenge, was pretty funny. But we're out one night, and we're out, drinking, bar hopping, pretty late. And there was this guy who had to present in the morning who was like, okay, I'm out. I got to go home. I got to go back to the hotel. And Gareth told him that he can't just announce that he's gonna leave the bar and go back to the hotel. That's the very subject in dispute. He's begging the question, by just announcing, that he asserting that he's going to go home. And the amazing thing is that actually worked. He stayed out for hours more. But let's see.
Sam, right there. So Sam, Ben accuses me all the time of lawyering. So I would say the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, I don't know why I say lawyering, because really it's philosophering, I'll say something that I think the meaning is pretty clear in context, and you'll like start searching for counterexamples, be like, yes, I'm not claiming that this is a universal truth. I'm just saying.
Marriage is awesome.
Yeah, Robert Kane is an incompatibilist who doesn't seem to have any religious motivation. That's, like I said, not everybody. That's just a guess. I might even be wrong about the larger guess, but that's a guess about probably where the predominant group comes in, if I had to guess.
That's probably Ben tells me sometimes that he has trouble understanding the intro mind, but I am very good at understanding the intro mind. Maybe I'm still stuck in the intro mind. Maybe that's it. And no, I do not want to prosecute thought and future crimes.
Wait, where's that?
Down farther. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know quite what the connection would be there. Well, maybe, right? I think that's probably something that we can't answer without going deep into the free will stuff, which is going to be the second half of the stream tonight. So maybe keep that in mind for later.
Darius.
Ooh, that's a good one. You want to go first, or?
So sure. So I was an English major, and I took some philosophy classes, and I added that to be my minor, and then I decided, well, I'll add that on as a second major. And then I was going to go to grad school, and I was like, well, should I do grad school in English or should I do grad school in philosophy? And I really, really love to read, and I have my entire life, and I didn't want to ruin reading for myself, so I went into philosophy.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And you?
And I know you've also said that your original thought for what to do with the philosophy degree was do like a ethics board, kind of.
Yeah, I wanted to do something having to do with applied ethics, but then as soon as I taught my very first class, I was like, nope, this is what I'm doing.
I won. That's my main thought. But
Okay, but what's your answer?
yeah, so my answer would be
His answer is much more acceptable than my answer.
I don't know what makes your answer less acceptable, but
Well, because people want some sort of deep, like, not like I didn't want to ruin my fun stuff by going to school at it.
I think that's a fair answer. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the thing to say to start with is that I like barely graduated from high school. I was a very uninspired student in high school. Was definitely, enjoying the non-homework parts of life, as a teenager, and when I first started college,
You should have had my mom. Would never have gotten away with.
well, I mean, mine wasn't happy about it, but
Well, your mom, his mom had she worked and she had 2 other kids. My mom had nothing to do but focus her
on you,
every
sure.
her every ray of energy on me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I did lots of, skipping class and hanging out with friends, and I was just not into school in high school. And
Bob, what is it that's surprising?
I think what I just said,
Oh,
I
okay.
believe.
What
So
did you just say?
about my
Oh, right.
yeah,
Your bad school.
yeah.
He was like Einstein. Just too smart for it all.
Well, I don't know about that, but I was definitely a slacker. And then when I first started it, like I mean, I was so not into it that like when I first started college, I went to Lansing Community College for my first year of college, and when I first started it, like I wasn't even really thinking that I would like get a 4-year degree. I was thinking I would get like a technical degree and get and just kind of get a job like like a 2-year technical degree, and I would get out that way.
Them plumbers, they make bank.
That was not the one I was going to do, but that was basically my kind of thought, right? That I would just do something along those lines. I had the idea that I had was going to be a numerical control, which is basically it's a kind of, it gets you a kind of skilled trade sort of technical factory job. So that was what I was going to do. But then when I started out, like while I was there, I took some electives, and then I realized that when you can actually pick your own classes and take things that that you find interesting, then that school is actually fun, or at least that was my experience. And then okay, yeah, there you go. And then I got like really into it, or at least I had like I got into school, right? I was taking a lot of classes I was interested in, did well, transferred to a 4-year college, although I still realized after another year that I didn't really know what I was doing, right? I was just kind of taking classes, and and I liked some of the classes and I found it interesting, but I didn't really have a plan. And so I took a year off in between my sophomore and junior years of college. I worked at a kosher grocery store for a while. I washed dishes at a Panera for a while, and I read a lot and thought about what I wanted to do. And one of the books that I read during that year off was an anthology edited by Walter Kaufman called Existentialism from Dostoevsky to Sartre, which has absolutely nothing to do with any philosophy class that I ever took after that. But I loved that book so much that it made me want to major in philosophy when I came back to school. And so I did. I went, small college in Grand Rapids where I finished up, and I was a philosophy major, and I was like real into that, like to the point where at one point the RA in my dorm said he thought I'd moved out, because like I had like all I was doing basically was reading and watching movies. See,
this is what people want to know. Like when they ask you why you got into philosophy or whatever, they want to know about your philosophical awakening. And what I had was I don't want to ruin reading for myself.
Well, I will say that like this is how I got interested in philosophy, although it's a little bit different from the question of how I decided to pursue that professionally, which is a lot more mundane. It's like kind of like, okay, I'm really into this. I like philosophy. And by the time I finished college, I was working not quite full time, because it's one of those things where they give you 5 more hours a week. They'd have to like change your status to full time and give you health insurance. So they didn't, but like essentially full time at Meijer, which is this big grocery
It's like Walmart.
Yeah, it's this big Walmart like grocery store chain in Michigan, Ohio, I think Kentucky.
Midwest Walmart.
Yeah, and in fact, I think Walmart was like I think Sam Walton like actually got the idea, from there. But although Meijer is unionized, so but
Let me cut into your really
but
long story here.
I was just gonna say though that that
Zickline you were not wrong. Okay, go on.
You are wrong. See the second half of the live stream for why. But yeah, so I was working like more or less full time at Meijer, loading and unloading boxes from trucks, which is exactly as much fun as it sounds. Like everybody I knew who worked there in the receiving area at Meijer, like at least once a month, would have to like go home early because they're getting nauseous from, being in the back of the hot truck. And it's extremely repetitive and whatever. So, and I was doing that like between that and school, that was 7 days a week, and I wasn't, I wasn't that into it. And so at the time, my main thought was, if I go to if I go to graduate school, I can get paid to like sit on the couch and grade papers, and that sounded better. So that was kind of.
Does grading papers really sound better than unloading boxes? Because I'm not sure it does.
It did when I was doing that, so I'll say that much.
Whichever one we're not doing is the one that sounds better.
Also true. Random little fact. I did go to high school with Nate Silver. We were actually both on the debate team 1 year. So yeah, so again, I think the how I got interested in philosophy story is better than the how I decided to go to graduate school in philosophy story. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it sounds trite to say that.
I don't have a hard time imagining.
Yes, I was going to say, sounds trite to say, but people are complicated. There are layers. I have
like an onion.
I mean,
Ben is like an onion.
I mean, now I'm kind of.
He makes me cry.
Aw.
What do you mean, aw? That's not good.
It just seemed like the right response.
Tears
somehow.
Of happiness.
But yeah, no, I don't. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of a workaholic now about like this sort of YouTube and podcast and debates and writing and all that stuff.
He's like a workaholic slacker.
But I never really was about anything else beforehand. With rare exceptions. I mean, and I think that's probably true for a lot of reasons. A lot of it's probably Michael Brooks's influence, that kind of constant Michael Brooks hustle. But in any case, let's see.
I do kind of that. I think that's a good way to describe it. You're kind of like a workaholic slacker.
Yeah. So, workaholic in certain aspects of life, not in others. I think that's probably right. Yeah. Much appreciated, fellow Ben. Liked doing that. I do not know who Nick Shabazz is, although it's kind of funny because we have a cat named Shabazz who you often hear. You never see, but you often hear.
Oh, his tail was.
Oh no! Sometimes you see his tail. That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. That'll happen.
It was just up here.
Yeah. Let's see. What else?
See, there you go.
There we go.
I did great in high school. Ben did terrible. What does that tell you?
Well, that tells me that doing
my mother had nothing else to do.
That doing badly in high school is not a necessary condition for being what Patrick is describing. So,
sure.
Yeah, I actually think we'll probably, I'm sure we'll get into this, but I think that one thing that all three of us are going to agree on is that the quantum randomness stuff is not going to be especially relevant. No.
No.
Yeah. So I should. Yeah, actually, funnily enough, Ryan has a paper about this. The published paper you can look up about. I don't remember what it's called, but it's got the word pre-punishment in it. So yeah, I mean, absolutely no. I would even say no if even in some scenario where you had like the police department had a crystal ball, to so they could like really, really, really be sure somehow. I mean, you might like preventatively detain somebody so they can't do whatever they're going to do, but that's a little bit different for punishment. So nope.
Nope.
You're forgiven, Tom. In fact, I think it works out pretty well because if you're talking about the class I'm teaching right now for the School for Social and Cultural Change, things ended up getting pretty held up because the week, we're in week 2, but the week 2 stuff isn't going up until at least tomorrow, so it'll last a little longer than it was supposed to. But between the last regular episode of the show and my birthday and getting like side effects from the second COVID shot and all sorts of other things, it's been a very busy week. So I think it all works out.
I had a student once who showed up for class the second week, and he was like, "Yeah, I thought class started this week." Okay, we all do these things.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of. Well, she spells with a K, but yes, big fan of crystal ball. Not a big fan of police departments having crystal balls so they can prosecute pre-crime. Oh, good. It's funny. I used to be very prone to a certain kind of anxiety dream that goes back to the thing about barely graduated from high school, which is that I would often have a dream where I found out that I didn't really graduate from high school and I had to go back and and finish it now. Which is ridiculous because I wasn't like taking a correspondence course or GED or anything like that. I was like literally going back to be in high school.
I've never had one of those dreams where you find out that your degree is fraudulent in some way, and you have to go back to school. It's never happened.
I actually had, I guess maybe related to being late with my week 2 materials for the School for Social and Cultural Change class, I had a structurally similar dream last night, but it wasn't about the high school. It was about I was showing up to teach the first day of an in-person class, and I realized I had no idea what the subject was. And so I had to be like super vague while I tried to figure out, what I'm supposed to be teaching. Oh yeah, no, I have not seen those. I did see the Red Skull thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't even know what a JP podcast is.
He's talking about Jordan Peterson.
Oh.
So in the new Captain America comics, apparently the Red Skull is the villain that Captain America always fights. Has like you see, like the Red Skull has a website, and the things the Red Skull is saying seem to be very, very Jordan Peterson-ish. Like there's a thing that's where you see on the computer screen the Red Skull website. It says order and chaos, and then it says 10 rules for life. Of course, Peterson famously has 12. But
that's too many.
Yeah, it's too many. Well, especially it's too many because his new book is subtitled 12 More Rules for Life.
Even God only gave us 10.
Right, exactly.
Come on.
But somehow Jordan Peterson needs to saddle us with 24. That's a little much. Like, I mean, if it's a trilogy, now we're going to get 36 rules for life. It's excessive. So, let's see. Yeah, kind of second half.
People really want us to get to that.
I know. We will.
Don't you have any questions for me about Ben?
Yeah, feel free within.
Yes, exactly. The petting the cats. Yeah.
Oh, where is that?
At the very bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was, I remember, I don't know all the 12 new rules from his new book, but out of the original 12 rules, I always said that actually the vast majority were totally fine. I think they're the kind of thing you probably find in a lot of
Wasn't there something like clean your room or make your bed or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, you should clean your room. You should like stand with your back up straight, you know? Like those
You should do what, Ben?
Those are perfectly good advice. Perfectly good pieces of advice. I clean.
Are they now?
I've done plenty of cleaning. Hasn't been all you cleaning.
You should see my side of our bedroom and his side. His side has to be, his side of the bed has to be the side away from the door, so that if you just look in, you can't see the disaster that's on the floor by his side of the bed.
Maybe a little bit sometimes, but whatever. I can acknowledge it's good advice, even if I don't always fulfill it. Even if he, I believe, doesn't always fulfill it. I think famously there was an image from like a Zoom thing he was doing where you could see his bedroom behind it. It was not in good shape, but yeah, most of those are totally fine. Like the only things that I really have a problem with were don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them, which seems like, come on, good luck with that, right? And then the thing about putting your house in perfect order before you try to change the world, which I think is just as politics infiltrating to self-help. And then I guess if you were going to have a problem with the third, it would be with the cat thing, because you know there is a concern if you're just petting random cats on the street about you bringing home diseases for your own pets.
Cat scratch fever and whatnot.
Yes, as Ted Nugent tried so hard to warn us about.
No, it's a thing. It's a real thing.
Yes.
What do you mean his room?
Yeah, our room. But
like,
I do.
Your office is a disaster, and there is nothing more. Okay, this is a marriage advice for y'all. There is nothing more important to a successful marriage than separate bathrooms.
No comment.
Oh, I like that one. Ben, actually, he is really, really good at handling stressful times, and I am not. So Ben is like a rock in times of in times of trouble. So yeah, Ben is the one that holds things down and tries to keep a lot of the stress away from me, actually, because of my mental issues. He doesn't want to, pile on. So he usually just takes care of stuff without me even knowing about it. But then stuff like moving and he's good with everything.
Just message Ryan the StreamYard while I'm thinking about it. Let's see.
How do I handle stressful times?
I mean, I always get through.
Yeah, I mean, that's about all we can say. I get through them.
No, this is giving a misleadingly bad impression, but yeah.
No, you are fantastic at stressful times.
I appreciate that. Have not actually watched that channel, although that's a good reminder. I think I've heard about it a few times. I should check that out. And similarly, I have not seen the new Philosophy Tube video on Jordan Peterson, though I'd be very curious to. I remember she did a really good video a long time ago about Ben Shapiro's abortion stuff that ended up sort of doing the Judith Jarvis Thompson thought experiment. So I would be interested in checking that out. I think that would be interesting. Let's see. Get the 12-volume series, 12 rules each. Yeah, well, this would actually kind of be a fun one. So what John is referring to, for anybody who's not familiar with it, is Russell's paradox, which is about naive set theory. So set theory is a branch of mathematics where you're talking about collections, more or less, So
if we're going to do anything having to do with math, we'll have to get Kathy on here. She has to be our special guest for that one.
So, in any case, yeah, that would actually be fun. That'd be interesting. So, yeah, there's, so yeah, set is a collection, but not in the sense that like a pile of things is a collection or a herd of sheep is a collection, you know, because if the herd of sheep, the sheep are all dispersed and they all go live on separate farms, right? You know, maybe the herd doesn't exist anymore, but the set of the sheep in that herd still exists. And so what's now somewhat insultingly called naive set theory, the old kind of set theory from like the late 19th century, early 20th century, at least as is usually understood. If somebody is like a historian of mathematics, they want to come at me about the details, just skip it, right? But as is usually understood, it's, naive set theory said that for every description, there's a set of all the objects, all and only the objects that meet that description. So for the description being a sheep, there's the set of all sheep. For the description being a set, there's the set of all sets. For the description being an object that's neither a sheep nor a set, there's the set of everything that's neither a sheep nor a set. So like this beer is in that set, you know, I'm in that set, you're in that set.
What about me?
You too. You're neither a sheep nor a set. In any case.
Wait, who's this Ben and Abigail that are so cute?
I don't think he means together. I think he just means that we're each individually cute. But,
okay, we're going to talk about this later.
Abigail Thorne is the host of the Philosophy Tube YouTube channel. Well, thank you for the second part. I don't think anything is still ongoing there. I mean, Michael had a lot of coals in the fire about different projects that he was planning on doing, or things that just a little bit of were written, before he died. So, unfortunately, we're not going to see any of that. But in any case, so for every description, according to naive set theory, there's a set of all and only the objects that match that description. So there's this German mathematician and philosopher, Gottlob Frege.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Gottlob Frege, who I think it was like plausibly a German accent the first time. I don't know what it was the second time.
It was fantastic.
And he wrote this book called The Foundations of Arithmetic, where he's trying to reduce all of mathematics to logic. And one of the principles that he was using was basically this thing I just said. Frege's an interesting guy, kind of a, probably not a great guy. Might be good that, for the reputation of analytic philosophy that he died before, when he did, because he seems to have been kind of an anti-Semite and an extreme German nationalist. So who knows how he would have acted in the 1930s, but an interesting philosopher and, philosopher and mathematician. And so one of his principles that he was using for this grand project of reducing mathematics to logic was this one that I just said, about how for every description, there's a set of things that match that description. Also, if anybody's a Frege scholar, they're going to be like, no, that's not quite right. That's like, actually, it was a slightly different principle that entailed that. Okay, just
this is why we need your mom.
For the sake of brevity, let's just like run with my slightly, my good enough description of it just now.
Or maybe your mom could like take my place for that day.
But in any case, like this was an important claim for like what he's doing there. And just as it was going to press, like they literally started to print up copies of it. Frege got a letter from Bertrand Russell saying, "Hey, wait a second, bro, I just thought of something. What about this? What about the set of all sets that are not members themselves?" And so, of course, just ruined the whole thing. because if you ask, okay, is the set of all sets that are not members
I'm gonna
themselves
look up best picture winners because I don't care about this.
a member of itself or not, then you've got a paradox, because if the set of all sets are not that are not members themselves, if that set is a member of itself, then it's not a set that's not a member of itself. Therefore, it's not a member of itself. But if it's not a member of itself, then it's a set of all sets that are not members themselves. Therefore, it is a member of the set of all sets that are not members themselves.
It's becoming alarming.
In any case, so if it is, it isn't, and if it isn't, it is. If you get like lost in that description, if it just sounds like a sea of words, a helpful analogy that Russell himself brought up, I think he claimed it wasn't original to him, that was suggested to him by the librarian at Oxford or Cambridge, whichever one he was at, is that the barber paradox. So imagine a barber, a male barber who lives in the town. So a town where the barber shaves all the men in the town who don't shave themselves. And so you say, who shaves the barber? Well, if he shaves himself, he's not a man who lives in the town who doesn't shave himself. Therefore, he's not shaved by the barber. Therefore, he doesn't shave himself. If you say he doesn't shave himself, then he is a man in the town who doesn't shave himself. Therefore, he's shaved by the barber. Therefore, he does shave himself. And fair enough. Correct. We're not going to get into it, but correct. And then another analogy that I like is from a philosopher whose name I always badly mispronounce. I'm not even going to try. It starts with CH. It's like
Type it. Type it.
I might even be misspelling it, but I think it's something like that. Anyway, so that dude
I've never even heard of that person.
Has this paper from the 1970s. It's a very 1970s example. It's the Secretaries Liberation Club paradox. So the idea there is you have a bunch of secretaries who work for clubs that won't let the secretary join the club. Outraged by this injustice, they get together and form their own club, the Secretaries Liberation Club. The membership rules of the Secretaries Liberation Club are very simple. Membership is open to all and only secretaries who work for clubs who won't let the secretary join the club. Inevitably, so many secretaries join the Secretaries Liberation Club that they have to hire a secretary of their own. Let's call her Fran. And inevitably, Fran applies to join the Secretaries Liberation Club. Is she eligible to join? Well, if she is, she isn't. If she isn't, she is.
I'm just going to start answering other people's questions here.
Hey, come on. Just give
but for real.
No, but let's do it on screen. Like, we're almost done here. So,
Rummy Cube. Lately we've started playing Skippo.
Yeah, lots of Skippo lately.
Yeah, Ben gets really, really intense when we play Skippo. Rummy Cube is our classic. Our second classic is Batman Flux. And lately we've been doing a lot of Rummy Cube and Odin's Ravens.
Yeah.
We play a game every day.
Yep.
We're dorks like that.
Yep. Oh, good. Oh, no, you mean when I was doing like the historian of mathematics who's correcting me about, yeah. That's not right. So fair enough.
That's how he talks to me all the time.
So anyway, just to wrap up the thought real quick, of course, you can't have a barber who both shaves and doesn't shave himself. You could have one who had that as the stated policy, but then he could have a sign in his window saying shaves all the men who don't shave themselves, and every other man in the town could play along. But of course, he wouldn't be able to completely fulfill this policy because he can't shave and not shave himself at the same time. Doing this in class, I often urge people to go home and try for themselves in the mirror. Like it won't work.
Is that like kissing your own elbow?
Right. And then similarly, you could have the Secretaries Liberation Club, but like whatever decision they made about Fran would violate their rules. That's not an enforceable rule. In the case of the Russell set, the set of all sets that are not members themselves, this is why most versions of set theory since then say, no, there is no such thing. So we reject this principle that for every description there's a set of all and only the objects that match that description. Instead, you do something like you start out with the empty set, the set of no members. You have the set whose only members the empty set. You have the set whose only members are the empty set, and that other set, and you go on from there. That would be a example, and we're done.
Okay,
all right.
So the worst best pick. This is kind of funny because I don't see that many movies, so I'm just going to throw that out right now. But last night, Ben tried to get me to watch Annie Hall, and about how far were we?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. I was like, he's annoying, and this is boring.
It's like this. Well, I'll say something I often say in private, which is there's a Simpsons for that.
Simpsons for everything.
There's an old Simpsons episode where Marge says, I like Woodsy Allen, but I don't like that little nervous man who's in all his movies.
Yeah, and then somebody asked about our favorite movies. So my favorite movies are Rock of Ages and Top Gun and Sing, the Pixar movie. I think that's Pixar. And there's a really old Clint Eastwood movie that if any of y'all have seen it, I will be shocked. It's called The Eiger Sanction. And those are my favorite movies.
I like The Eiger Sanction. It's a fun movie.
You had never heard of it until I made you watch it.
I had not. And I like Clint Eastwood movies. I'm a fan.
Exactly.
But I'd never heard of this one.
It has so many great lines in it. My mom and I watched this movie so many times because it used to be showing on TV just constantly. And every time she would be flipping through the channels and it would be on, she'd be like, yo, The Eiger Sanction's on. And then we would watch it and we still quote it at each other to this day. So there you go.
Fair enough. Yes. So I guess my favorite movies, God, I don't know off the top of my head.
Go to the bottom. I've missed a lot.
I mean, honestly, I think that we've done a decent number of my favorite movies for the Wednesday movie live streams. Apocalypse Now is one of my favorite movies. We've done that. Goodfellas is one of my favorite movies. We've done that. Casino. I guess we haven't done Godfather. These are.
Aren't we going to do A Bug's Life?
These are not sure.
Wasn't that
yeah, somebody suggested it because
thing we were going to do?
Because it's all about class struggle.
And it's actually something I'll watch.
So yeah, not a very deep cut. The Godfather is one of my favorite movies. The Shining is one of my favorite movies.
That's a good movie.
And we just did that on Wednesday. And we did The Shining with David Griscom, Forrest, of course, J. Andrew World, our graphic designer,
J. Andrew,
Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks and Jacobin, and we also had as one of our guests for that stream this guy,
my favorite person.
Hey guys,
here, move over. You're not in the picture.
Hey,
you can sit close to me. Your wife will allow it.
Okay.
Here, can I do something real fast?
Sure. So there we go. Yeah. So we did. Oh yeah, Twins in The Shining are very creepy. That's definitely one of the most.
Ryan, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, my favorite movie. Okay, that's tough.
Oh my God, I totally forgot. Cale Brooks was in that stream, and Cale, I think, was the one who's the YouTube producer from Jacobin. I think he's the one who was talking the most in that stream. Like Cale had like a 2 years of postdoctoral work level of stuff to say about The Shining.
No, I literally felt like I took an undergrad introductory class just on The Shining with Cale there. That was great.
Better lake in a car than one's car in a lake.
It's true. It's true.
That is one of my it's so ancient we could probably play it without getting the copyright strike. But yes, there's the one of my all-time favorite clips of Tom Waits. It's like 10 seconds long. Nope. Anyway, I can't find it, but it's Tom Waits. He's on a talk show. It's like Dick Cavett or something, and he's visibly drunk.
See, Cookie Monster is never visibly drunk.
And I'm trying to remember what the pun was, but it was some pun that was like very similar to that he does. And then like the best part about the clip is just Waits like grinning after he says it, like he's so proud of himself for having pulled off the joke.
I wish I'd thought of it. We should have prepared that in advance so I could deliver it in a Tom Waits way. But
better a lake in a car than a car in a lake. So we
I hear you two are gonna spew toxic compatibilism.
yeah, that's what a friend of the show, Joshua Blanchard, said on Twitter, that that he was expecting us to spew toxic compatibilism. But this is good because we've been doing Q&A while we waited, and as you can tell, we've sort of moved on to non-philosophical questions. But the audience really wants to hear about free will, because like we said, we were going to talk about free will in the second half when you got here, but we were going to take questions about other stuff beforehand, and it was still like half the questions were still about free will. But before we do that, so Ryan, favorite movies?
Favorite movies. I mean, so I'm very, very partial to time travel movies. So some of the movies that really influenced my taste in movies were, especially, I'm probably my top. It's hard for me to pick one, but like some of my very top, I'll say top 3 all-time favorite movies are the original Terminator, Terminator 1, Back to the Future, the original one, and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Probably my top 3 favorite.
Cute, Brian.
Top 3 favorite movies.
I can't take it.
Yeah, which is one of those movies. So let's see. Yeah, and 2 of those movies are actually
Primer. Yes, anybody who has not seen Primer, you must see Primer.
Primer's amazing. Yep.
Yeah, Predestination. That was the one based. That's the one based on that Heinlein story, All You Zombies, which is one of my favorite like old time science fiction short stories. I thought the movie was just okay, but like the story is great.
Yeah.
They made it slightly more complicated than they should have for the movie, but which is understandable because it's like a 3-page story.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I mean, Primer is fun, but yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for like internally consistent time travel. That's something I'm a big fan of because it's so rare, and because I spent far too much of my life arguing about how time travel could work.
I'm a sucker for movies with pretty people. That's what I want in my movies, pretty people. So if Tom Cruise is in the movie, I'm there. If Kristen Stewart is in the movie, I'm there. Pretty people.
Is Keanu Reeves not pretty enough for you?
Oh, he's pretty. He's pretty, but not
at
that period of his life.
Come on,
like
Bill and Ted.
Period. Oh, so.
Is Arnold Schwarzenegger not pretty enough for you?
No.
Yeah. So, I'm far too easily like this is the most like, this is like the most like humorlessly pedantic and nerdy thing about me, that I'm like far too impatient about nonsensical time travel in movies. So although they certainly have that in the future, and I still like it.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a different podcast, but I think there is an internally consistent way to tell the Back to the Future story that has exactly 2 timelines.
We should do a time travel.
That's another podcast. But you have to ignore the second and third movie. Same as with Terminator, you have to ignore the later stuff. Like the original Terminator is a beautiful, internally consistent time travel story. Bill and Ted, actually, as far as I can tell, all the movies are beautifully internally time travel stories. And then Back to the Future, the original one can be beautifully internally consistent, just with 2 timelines. 2 timelines.
Ryan's dissertation relied heavily on the Terminator.
It did, yeah.
I know because that is the only dissertation I've ever read.
And if you're going to read a dissertation, it should be the one where the opening chapter is all about Terminator. So
I agree.
Yeah. Ryan's dissertation is called No Fate But What We Make, the compatibility of free will and determinism, or maybe it's the other way around. But the main title is definitely No Fate But What We Make, from the line from Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I think, Terminator. First Terminator, eternally consistent time travel. The Bill and Ted, totally eternally consistent time travel. Kind of a goofy.
As goofy as Bill and Ted was, like, they really thought through the metaphysics of time travel, like, really carefully, and it was great.
That is good to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Back to the Future, it's one of the only ones where I'm not annoyed by the nonsensical time travel rules, the apparently nonsensical time travel rules, because it's got such a dreamlike sort of fairy tale atmosphere that like I'm okay with.
Absolutely.
Wait, what movie?
Back to the Future.
Okay, I lost track.
Yeah.
Back to the Future is just like a masterpiece of filmmaking overall, like even apart from the time travel stuff. Like, it's just a perfect movie. It's so good.
The Simpsons Halloween special was great.
Oh yeah.
Not entirely consistent, but great.
Really good.
I have not seen that.
Yes, there's a line in there where Homer has realizes he's back in time. He's like, okay, remember the advice that your father gave you on your wedding day? And you flashes Grandpa Simpson in a suit saying, if you ever travel back in time, be sure not to change anything.
I've only seen Simpsons that Ben has made me watch, and he hasn't made me watch that one.
Doesn't that one end with them all having like laser tongues, and he's like, good enough, like after all the fucked up timelines?
See, there you go.
Yeah.
I don't need to do it now.
Yeah, it does. You'll enjoy it more when you see how they get there.
Yeah.
Well, I would just say that by internally consistent, I mean internally consistent. So that would allow objects to only exist in a loop. But the point is just, like that's definitely entailed by being internally consistent. But just that the thing that annoys me in time travel movies is when they do. There's a British, I think, philosopher named Nicholas J.J. Smith who has a great paper called "Bananas Enough for Time Travel," where he calls this the second time around fallacy. So it's the mistake of thinking if you're traveling back in time, so you're literally traveling back to the past of our universe, where you think that there are like two versions of the past, right? The one without the time traveler in it, and the one with the time traveler in it.
I want to have a world that rains donuts.
So when
that's like utopia.
Well, that's what Homer thought at first. So
Homer and I have a lot in common.
That reminds me of another episode I want to show you.
Great.
So when like that's if you think that you could change the present that you came from by traveling back to the past, it's because you think that there was some like initial version of the past without you in it. But if you're literally traveling back into the past of our timeline, there is no version of you of the past without you in it. That's it. That's the only version. Whatever you did in the past that changes the present, already by definition happened before you left.
We should watch the Loki show.
I didn't know there was a Loki show.
You didn't?
I did not.
I didn't know that either.
How do y'all not know that and I know that?
Oh,
I don't know.
Maybe my mom told me.
Yeah, I had no idea, but I'd watch that. I'd watch that. Let's watch it.
Let's watch it.
Yeah. Does that have Loki, like Tom Hiddleston Loki?
I think,
I'm totally down for that.
Nice.
Somebody else pretty. that's
Anyway, okay.
So my mom thinks so. That's why we watched.
I don't understand your standards of pretty if you think Tom Hiddleston is pretty and not Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You're so weird.
You're weird.
I don't know, Jen.
The Scarlet Witch. That's why I watched that, because she's like just so hot.
Yeah,
she's very pretty.
She's so
but I mean, she's not as cool as Agatha, but she's pretty. Way less cool theme song.
Well, Jen always accuses me of pretending that I don't understand the like basic differences about like guys' looks. That like it's
yeah. He's person's attractive, and I'm like, okay, so we're gonna put Brad Pitt up next to Danny DeVito, and you can't tell me who's better looking. That's a guy. They're all guys. They all look the same.
I thought I understood these things until you tried to say Tom Hiddleston's more attractive than Arnold Schwarzenegger. So now I don't know.
Good comment for me.
Ryan, you're gonna be in the dark.
It's
He'll be you know,
a street light just turned on, so I have some. You can kind of see my face.
Like that's okay though. If you're gonna like sort of spout philosophical wisdom, you know, do it like shrouded in darkness, like Kurt's at the end of Darkness now.
Yeah, this is the intellectual dark web right here. I'm gonna spout some Sam Harris type wisdom.
Brad Pitt, but you cannot find him more attractive than Brad Pitt. That's just like a rule of existence.
Yeah, dude, Agatha's hot just because of how hilarious
Agatha's
she is.
not hot.
She's totally hot.
Okay,
she's not hot.
So, the same way that we disagree, that Ryan and Jen disagree about whether Agatha is hot, they also disagree about free will and determinism.
We sure do.
Is that in the same way? Is it the same kind of disagreement?
Just a flawless segue there. I'm very proud of it.
It might actually be similar. It just comes down to fundamentally different intuitions. There's really no point in discussing, but we can try.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess one way to to set this up is just to like start out by thinking about
undoing what I keep doing.
Oh my god, this is so disconcerting to have the screen be in this position.
It's disconcerting to have it otherwise.
I feel like there's a free will joke in there somewhere, but
it's a free will joke everywhere.
All right, I'll force myself to stop adjusting it back to look normal.
Thank you.
But yeah, so I guess one way to start this would be to think about why it seems to so many people that there is a problem that like physical cause and effect determinism, creates a problem for free will in the first place. I know the position's unnatural. So if we just centered the screen,
stop it.
So why it is that this would be a problem in the first place, and I guess I assume most people who are interested in this enough to tune into a live stream about free will and determinism have some idea about all these things.
Yeah, I don't think we have to go total intro class here.
Yeah, so without going total intro class,
never seen Sling Blade. Somebody really wants to know about Sling Blade, whether we like it.
Sling Blade.
Never seen it.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it actually.
I mean, it's no Back to the Future.
Fair enough.
There you go.
So we don't have to go intro class, but I think just like the idea, what we mean when we talk about determinism is the idea that if you from any time slice of the universe, in other words, the way that things are at one discrete time, you could extrapolate the way that they're going to be at all the other time slices, certainly at least all the future ones. And I think really all the past ones too, but whatever, future's more relevant maybe. Yeah. So given the total way that the universe currently is, there's exactly one total way that it could be in the future. So is that a good starting definition for determinism?
Yeah, or I mean, well, it depends on what you mean by could be, because I mean that's going to be one of the points of contention for classical compatibility.
The starting definition.
Yeah, but as a starting, I mean, there's one way the future can be that's consistent with the past events of the universe and the actual laws of physics.
Yeah.
Given the state of the universe at time t and the laws of nature, there's only one way that things can be at time t1.
Yeah, given every single fact, right? We're not leaving anything out about all
what
the,
I meant by every fact.
Yeah.
All the facts.
Okay.
We don't leave any out.
Okay. Given all the facts about the past and present and all the laws of nature, we're not changing.
We're not leaving any out.
We're not leaving anything out. We're not changing anything. Given that there's exactly one way the future could be, in which case many people ask, as Darius does, so where's the free will?
Yeah.
And if you try to make precise that worry, right? Like, I mean, I think lots of people have that sort of intuitive reaction when they first hear that, that claim, right? That like, oh, problem for free will. And you try to make precise what the problem is. I think there are at least two problems for free will that could come out of that. Ryan, you want to start us up there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there are two basic intuitions about free will from which you would intuitively think that determinism of the sort we just described is incompatible with free will. So one intuition is that in order for you to have free will, it has to be possible that you could do otherwise than what you actually do. So that at time t, like, to really have free will, like, so say if I'm choosing, whether to stay in Atlanta for a job or whether to move to Tennessee for a job, in order to really have free will about that choice, it has to be possible that I could choose both things. So that's one intuition where you would say that free will is it leads you to think free will is incompatible with determinism. Another intuition about free will that would lead you to think they're incompatible is that in order for it to be acting freely, I have to, in some sense, be the real source of my choices. And determinism would seem to entail that I'm not the real source of my choices, because all of my choices would be determined by earlier events, which would be determined by earlier events, which could ultimately be traced to things that even precede my existence, like all the way back to the Big Bang of the universe.
Yeah. So that second argument, the argument that the sort of sourcehood worry about free will given determinism, if people want like a good, very accessible, very non-academic, introduction to that second argument, there's an essay that Galen Strawson wrote for the New York Times several years ago called "The Maze of Free Will," where he's pushing that one really hard. So yeah. And I think in some way, so then like, when you argue about whether, free will determinism are compatible or incompatible, you end up arguing about both of those things, right? Whether there's some sense in which you could do otherwise, given the total way that things are, and whether you can be the source of your actions in the right way. And I think one thing that comes out really quickly when you start thinking about the first question, whether there's some sense which you could do otherwise, and I guess this is what you were kind of getting at earlier, Ryan, is that the word could is incredibly ambiguous. Like, so an example I was thinking about when we were doing something for one of Jen's intro classes about this a while ago. An example that I was thinking about was like, even when there's like certainly when you talk about, like if you're shooting hoops in the backyard, you don't make it, and no comments from you about how often I make it. So,
what about your shooting style?
Yeah. So if somebody says, "Oh, you could have made it," right?
Yeah.
Like you could have made that shot.
Yeah.
What
I like the Boulder example.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to get to, right? So, like, so they don't actually mean if you aimed in exactly the same way and applied exactly as much force, et cetera, then you would have, because that's clearly just uninterestingly false. Of course, you would have. What they mean.
And then I started talking about Paul George hitting the side of the backboard in Game 7, playoff P.
Yeah.
So, but then, like, even in cases where there's no will involved at all, right, where there's no like human, volition, we still sometimes use the word "could" that way. Like, if you're camping and a boulder, rolls onto your tent, and it like rolls onto an area like 2 feet away from where from where your sleeping bag is set up, thank you, then you might easily say, oh, that could have killed us, right?
Yeah.
And of course, given its exact starting point and, blah, 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 blah.
And where you were located.
It
could not have
have killed you, but we still know exactly what somebody means when they say, oh, that could have killed us.
Exactly. What we mean is, like, in relevantly similar situations, there are many cases in which that would have killed you. Or like when you're shooting the basket, in relevantly similar situations, there are many cases, given your abilities, given your talents, given your training, that you would have made that basket.
Well, not Ben.
Other
people.
We're not talking about Ben, obviously.
I make it sometimes. I've never successfully gotten it.
Right. But when we're talking about a competent basketball player, we would say, yeah, given relevantly similar situations, he would have made that basket.
So not Ben,
but not similar in every detail, because, of course, and if it was similar in every detail, the basket would not get made.
Yeah, exactly. So this gives you some sense of how people come up with compatibilist accounts of how you still could have done otherwise, given determinism, that in relevantly similar possible worlds, where relevantly similar includes a bunch of important facts about you and how you make decisions and blah blah blah, then we think that you could have made a different decision, even though, of course, like the relevantly similar possible worlds where the boulder squashes you, or the relevantly similar possible worlds where the better basketball player makes the shot, these ones would have to be a little bit different in their starting conditions, because if you keep everything the same as far as all of the facts about what your brain chemistry is like at time t and all that stuff, then of course you will make.
So we're not leaving any facts out.
The same decision, and I think that there's a less charitable and a more charitable way to put this point. I'll do the more charitable one. Maybe Jen can do the less charitable one, but
that in itself is a little misleading.
But I think the more charitable.
But you can't blame Ben for putting it that way. So.
yeah, clearly not my fault. I couldn't have done otherwise. So I think that, clearly, the right answer to "could you have done otherwise" is. Depends what you mean by could, right? Because there are tons of different.
What does "is" mean?
I can count on you for the less charitable interpretation.
Yeah.
Because there are tons of different things that you might mean by could. I mean, think about the stupid old joke about the guy with his hand in his cast. Will I be able to play the piano when it gets taken off? Oh, of course. Oh, good. I never could before.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the compatibilist insight, and there's room for debate about whether that's the precise sense of could that's relevant for free will, but clearly there's an ordinary common sense way we talk about abilities and talk about could that is not precluded by causal determinism.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that one way to think about this, though, and I think you could acknowledge that without being a compatibilist, and you kind of gestured at this just now, because you could say, look, if sure, could varies wildly depending on context.
Mm-hmm.
Just in our ordinary common sense usage of it, it still varies wildly depending on context.
But if I'm looking at the cake and the peach, and I have the cake and then regret it later, which is something that I've never understood why that would happen, but and then you say, I could have had the peach. We all know what you mean by that. We don't have to parse the word could.
Well, but that's the question.
I think we actually do have to parse it, because
we don't.
But if you say I could have, do you actually mean I could have, given the total way that the universe is and all the laws of physics? Because I'm actually a little skeptical about reading that into what ordinary speakers mean when they say could have.
Yeah, my sense is that it's like LeBron James trying to. I mean, it depends on the person. If a person has I think it will depend on some facts about the person. If you have a true like neurophysiological addiction to cake, then maybe you can't. Like maybe in every situation you would always do the same thing. But if it's like a skilled basketball player trying to make a shot, and usually they have the willpower to resist it, and this one time they didn't, you still say, well, he could have resisted it. This is just one of the weird situations in which he didn't.
Yeah, so I think that's right. Like my sense about what most people mean by could is that obviously they don't have like a worked out theory or anything, but like on a common sense level, there are certain things that they would consider to be like, oh, you couldn't because, and there's like a list of things that would be on there. There are a list of things that they wouldn't consider to be relevant, they wouldn't consider to be reasons you couldn't. And then,
but I think when people see that question, I could have had the peach instead. What it means is when you're standing there, just like in the article, when you're standing there and there's the cake and the peach, right up until the moment that you chose the cake, you could have chosen the peach instead.
But that doesn't tell us anything about what could have meant, because could have is used in the explanation.
Yeah, I totally agree that you could have. And you could have meaning that you are the kind of person.
It was an open possibility.
Okay, but what is open possibility?
So
this is why philosophers are so obnoxious, and this is why when a bunch of philosophers get together, I bring my Kindle.
So
let me say a little bit more, because so I mean I think this is where you can end up at an impasse. So one of my favorite philosophers on this question is Hilary Bach, and she gives this kind of Kantian account to really motivate the compatibilist understanding of could in these kinds of situations. So what she argues, and it's a very Kantian thing, but she does Kant without all the metaphysics, so we can leave that aside. But what she argues is that when we're engaged in the world as practical agents, so as agents who have to deliberate between different options, we have to abstract be away from the sum total of all the facts of the universe. So if you're choosing between if you're actually in that moment making a choice between the peach and the cake, to engage in reason about those options, you have to treat those both as live options. Because your reasoning process is part of the causal chain, the only way it can be part of the causal chain is for you to treat those both as live options, because whatever you choose is the thing that's going to determine what your action is. So if you didn't treat those both as live options, you wouldn't be able to even begin to be an agent who's considering which thing you should do.
Yeah, so I would just say on the could question, I mean, my read would be all earnestness that I think that ordinary speakers like have some intuitions about the things that would count as things that would mean you couldn't, and the things that are relevant to whether you couldn't. But then what we do when we do philosophy about this is we try to find ways to sort of form those intuitions into an internally consistent theory. We're trying to bring them into some kind of reflective equilibrium, and it's not like it's not like the sort of ordinary speaker intuition just like commands an answer to that. It's like tricky, right? Try to figure out, it's like, what's the thing that's going to make sense of all of the sort of common sense reactions to this, or as many of them as possible, at least, if we can't make sense of all of them. So there are senses of could. I really like David Lewis. He's got this thing about how could, when we say that you could do something, he thinks we mean it would be jointly possible with some relevant set of facts.
Exactly.
And he says we never take all of the facts to be relevant, because then it would never be the case that you could have done anything. If nothing else.
Bach's point is if you were trying to think through all of the facts, you just wouldn't even be an agent engaged in practical reason, right? To engage in practical reason, you have to say, okay, some facts I've got to abstract away from. Some facts are relevant. Like I can't choose to step out of the car and fly up into the sky, because that's inconsistent with the laws of physics. But there is some range of options that it's true that if I chose it, I would do it. And those are the range of options that are precisely relevant for being an agent engaged in practical reasoning. So what I like about her account is how she connects it to that Kantian sense of practical reason, like that to be an agent against practical reason, you need that exact range of options, and those are the facts that are relevant. Like, which are the things that are such that if I chose them, I would in fact do them.
Yeah. So, I was going to say Lewis's example, which is a fun one, is like, he says, unlike an ape, I could speak Finnish. The ape doesn't have the capacity to speak Finnish. It's, vocal, chords aren't they're the right way. But don't take me to Helsinki to be your translator because I can't speak Finnish.
Yeah.
So like which facts count as relevant depends on the context.
Exactly.
So I think there are things that might mean that are compatible. Like I think there are things that could have done otherwise might mean that are compatible with determinism. There are things that could have done otherwise might mean that are clearly incompatible with determinism. And so maybe the more interesting way to ask the question is, what is the sense of, like, if it's important that you be able to do otherwise to be free, you get to have free will, like what's the, what it seems like we really mean when we argue about free will is what's the sense in which you have to be in control of your actions to be morally responsible for them, for things like praise and blame and all guilt and all that stuff, to be something like apt attitudes that would fit what you the objective reality, which is actually something important to clarify, because it's not like the Sanders thing where like he just portrays compatibilists as thinking that you have free will if you think you have free will. I think
that's right.
The real question is like, okay, objectively, do you? And so, like, if you're at kind of an impasse about this, because it's like, okay, some people hear the sorts of examples that Ryan and I have been spewing and say, oh, okay, so fair enough, right? There is a common sense of could have that's relevant here. And some people hear all this and say, oh, God's sake, you're just playing with words. You know what I mean, right? That's not, could have. You really could have. This is not really could have, damn it. And then I think one place to go from there is to think, okay, well, look, one way to think about what's the sense of could have that's actually relevant, if it's relevant at all. There are people who deny that, right? But like if could have is really relevant to whether you're free, right? Whether you're really in control of your actions, the right way to be responsible, then maybe the real question should be about this sourcehood worry, because in some ways, like, that might actually be like the bigger challenge out of the two, because even if you're sort of comfortable, semantically comfortable with the sense of could have, you could have done something else, even if you're determined, like, it's still easy to be kind of gnawed at by this worry that, come on, though, for me to be responsible for it, it has to be really up to me. And it's not really up to me if my decision is just can be traced back to some falling domino chain of cause and effect that goes back to before there wasn't me.
That's right. Yeah. I've always felt that the sourcehead concern is a much bigger threat to free will than the alternate possibilities concern, in part because I think there are plausible other ways to read could have. And also, I mean, if you want to get into it, there's also like the Harry Frankfurt kind of argument, which argues that we don't even need any sense of could have, really, because even if you couldn't have done otherwise, there are clear cases in which we intuitively judge people to be morally responsible for their actions.
Well, let's. What order do you want to do it in, Jen?
I lost the thread, like, way back.
Well, in order to regain the thread, you want to do Frankfurt?
Not really.
How do you want to do it?
I don't know. I'm kind of over it, to be honest.
Have you just finally realized that my dissertation was right? Is that it?
No, that's not it at all.
Okay.
I was just for 2 hours, and Ben's really loud, and my head hurts. So basically, what it is.
Sorry.
No, look. All I have to say about this business is that if you think that you have two open options, I don't even know what I was going to say. Never mind.
Okay.
I'm just done here, I think.
Oh yeah! Wow. I guess Antonio's right. So all right. Let's see if we can recover it. So if you have to, so is the thought that that in order for it to be really up to you, there have to be at least two options that are really open, whereby really open it means that like nothing that's outside of you dictates which one you
That
chose?
it could have come to pass that I chose the peach. And since it couldn't have come to pass, it wasn't free will.
Right.
Okay.
That's about it. That just seems so common sense and obvious to me that I don't even know what the point is of talking about it. But if you want to get into this, well, what does is mean, and what does, because these people define free will as long as you can do the thing that you want to do, then you have free will. Well, okay, but you can only want to do one thing. So the idea is, if you had wanted the peach, you would have gotten the peach. Because you wanted the cake, you got the cake. Whatever one you had wanted, that your actions are consistent with your mental states. Yeah. But if your mental states are determined, if you could only have wanted the cake, then you're just pushing the whole thing one back. And at that point, you don't have free will. So these people who think that you can have free will, they think that you can have it at this given point because your actions and your actions and your desires are aligning. But then if you go back one step, your free will is already gone. So
good. There. So I think this is important because this is moving more towards a sourcehood worry than a could have done otherwise worry. But I do think it's really important to note that there is a common sense meaning of could have done otherwise that's relevant for practical reason, which is just at that moment that as long as my will is being determined by what I judge I have the best reason to do, that is an important kind of freedom that some people lack, right? And for material reasons and other kinds of reasons, where some people won't have the freedom to guide their actions based on what they judge they have the best reason to do. But then there is still that sourcehood worry that like you can go a step further back and say, okay, but why do you have the particular desire? Like, what's the source of your desires? What's the source of your reasoning mechanisms? But that's a different kind of worry about free will. I think it's that second kind of worry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think seems like part of what Chad's articulating, like, is
once you hit that wall where you can't diverge, then where are you? Nowhere.
Well, part of this is the whole question of what does it mean to say you can't diverge.
If I can't want anything other than the cake, then I can't diverge. I can't want the other. I'm locked into wanting.
Yeah. So I mean, good. So I mean, I think you can push that a step further back, right? So I mean, of course, in some sense, you can't help but want the cake, and you can't help but want the peach too, right? And so, like, you repeat that situation 100 times. Given who I am, I'm going to want the cake for some reasons. I'm going to want the peach for some reasons, right? I want the cake because, I'm addicted to chocolate and it's delicious as cake.
I wouldn't want it.
Right. I want the peach because peaches are also tasty, not as tasty as cake, but I also want to be healthy and get my vitamin C, right? So I want both, right? So I have a set of desires that push me in both directions. And that will be true in all of the hundreds of times that I'm going to be faced with that choice, say, like if you repeat the situation over and over again. So yeah, in some sense, I can't help but want the cake. It doesn't follow from that I can't help but choose the cake. Because in many similar relevant situations, I won't choose the cake. I do have a general ability not to choose the cake. It's just in this particular situation, I did choose it, but in other similar situations, I might not.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, it'd be like the best.
I don't know if it's Ryan or if it's me.
It's much like the basketball situation. Like in many relevant situations, sometimes I'll make the shot, sometimes I won't. But in the cases where I don't make the shot, you wouldn't say I don't have the ability to make the shot. I do have the ability to make the shot. I do have the ability to choose the peach. Just sometimes I'll fail to do that.
Yeah, and it seems like even if, like, no matter, like, if you think that we live in a completely deterministic, universe, that's not going to stop you from thinking that there's an important sense in which you could have made the shot. And so something similar could be true here, that you could that you could have chosen the peach, in the sense that, given a bunch of relevant facts about you, those facts are consistent with you choosing the peach. But I mean, I do get what you're saying about, like, there is this sort of very simple version of compatibilism that just says that all you need for your will to count as free is that you're doing what you want, and if if you wanted to do something else, you would have done that, and that really is very unsatisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think partly, for the reason that you're articulating, because if because you could have, like, I think there are lots of people who actually, for, like, the stuff that Ryan referred to, the sort of all the various kind of cognitive disabilities and
Mm-hmm.
addictions maybe, or like all the different reasons that might come up, all the cases where everybody agrees that
Yeah.
people don't really have free will, that in those cases it's still the case that people are doing what they wanted, and if they wanted to do something else, they'd be doing that. So that doesn't look like that could possibly be sufficient, right? Or, like, you have this sort of really basic objections to compatibilism that's like, okay, if I hypnotize you, right, and say, you're not going to, I don't know, I always do this like goofy thing in in-person classes where I'll have, like, a pencil or something, and, like, I'll do it like the watch and, like, old-timey hypnotism in movies.
Yeah.
You're getting very sleepy, and when you wake up, you're not going to remember this conversation, but you'll have a burning desire to go to the bank and take out all your money and give it to your intro to philosophy professor. And if that hypnotism really worked that well, and that really happened, we surely wouldn't think that the person was acting of their own free will, certainly in whatever's not in the right sense that would be important for responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't seem like it could be right. And one way of thinking about why it wouldn't be right would be that sourcehood worry, because you say, okay, sure, that's fine, you wanted it, but, like, you're not, you didn't decide to want it. You're not the source of your, you're not the source of your desires, so you're not ultimately the source of your actions, and so you're not really free or really responsible.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there are two separate worries that can come up there, and they overlap somewhat. But one worry, and a lot of more recent compatibilist accounts have done a good job of dealing with this, like especially for the addiction cases, is that the person who's an addict is incapable of responding to reasons. Like, the person who's an addict, even if they recognize, like, so say I'm really addicted to cake or heroin or whatever, even if I recognize that there was good reasons not to eat the cake, it wouldn't matter. I would still eat the cake.
Really addicted to cake. Sorry, I was just really enjoying that combination of words. Just really addicted to cake or heroin or whatever.
Or whatever, whatever
One
sorts
of
of
those
things.
things,
Very similar sorts of social problems, I think. I'm going to get canceled just for saying that, but yeah. So if we assume someone has, like, a really genuine, true addiction, part of the problem with that is that it makes them unable to respond to reasons for doing otherwise, and then that does limit your ability to do otherwise, even in that very ordinary, common sense sort of way that we're talking about, because you can't act as a rational agent in response to the reasons that are in front of you. So a lot of compatibilists point to that and say it's not just to be free, it's not enough just that you want to do what you're doing. It also has to be the case that your desire and your motivating desire that actually results in action has to be produced by a cognitive mechanism that is responsive to reason, such that if there were a really good reason to do otherwise, you would often do the other thing in relatively similar situations.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me, but
why does your cognitive mechanism work the way it works?
Yeah, and so that's going to be a matter of luck. So some of us are going to have those cognitive mechanisms that are responsive to reasons, and so some of us will have free will in that sense, right? And that's going to come to genetics and upbringing and social context. And
you don't say.
Absolutely.
Genetics,
so some of us,
all the things that came before me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Shaped that right down to the.
Absolutely. So some of us are going to be determined to have these mechanisms that give us that kind of control. And that kind of control is the ability to respond to reasons. And those are the people that it's appropriate to hold responsible for their actions. Some people, due to bad luck, are not going to have that kind of free will because they had bad parenting or because they didn't have good genes or they have a tumor in their brain or whatever. They're not going to have the capacity to respond to reasons. So they don't have that kind of control over their actions. So that's why it's compatibilism. It's not like metaphysical free will. Not everyone can just choose to have this control over their actions, this kind of control. But those of us who are lucky to have it, have the kind of free will that makes us appropriate targets for praise and blame.
Yeah.
Coffee is disgusting, by the way.
Well,
I'm not going to take your coffee.
That's an even more serious area of disagreement. But,
We'll do another Philosophy Friday on coffee. But.
Coffee, good thing or bad thing.
See, but believing in free will because of Ted Bundy, that just why?
Well,
it might. If you don't believe in free will, then you might think, well, and now I can't hold Ted Bundy responsible. Well, okay. Sometimes you just don't get the outcomes that you want.
Well, it's also
I don't know if we can hold Ted Bundy responsible. I mean, part of my account is maybe Ted Bundy is not an appropriate.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, but my larger point was that
it's just kind of a funny example because Ted Bundy might very well, like, I don't know. I'm not too.
That had nothing to do with what I was saying.
I'm not too up on Ted Bundy's mental condition, but I think that it's very plausible that whatever it was would preclude him, from making truly free decisions. But what are you going to say?
My point was that the conclusion. If you don't like the conclusion of an argument, that doesn't mean the argument is bad.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, totally agree with that.
That's all I was saying.
But to take another example that's similar to the Ted Bundy example, this is one of like Sam Harris's, to make a little callback to that dude. One of his favorite examples is, and I can't remember the guy's name. Maybe I'm sure someone in the chat will remember if you guys don't. But the Texas shooter from the clock tower who like murdered 17 people with a rifle. Apparently that guy, like, he wrote a note before he did this saying like, I don't know why, but I'm having all these uncontrollable fits of rages and you should look in my brain because I don't understand what's going on. And then they actually did look in his brain. Apparently he had a tumor, I think pressing on the Whitman. Yes, thank you, Charles Whitman. I knew I could count on you guys. Apparently he had some sort of tumor like pressing on the prefrontal cortex. And so Sam Harris says, see, we're all just like Whitman. None of us have free will. But that's like exactly the perfect kind of case to illustrate the compatibilist point. If he really had a brain tumor pushing on his brain that interfered with his reasoning process so that he could not respond appropriately to the reasons for not shooting people, then on a standard compatibilist account, he doesn't meet the conditions for free will.
Yeah.
Not that this is directly relevant, but a lot of doctors have looked at his brain scans and stuff, and they don't actually think that tumor had anything to do with why he did what he did.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm just assuming.
Yeah, I know that's not relevant to this. I'm just saying. So it's kind of funny that he did end up having a tumor, but then it seemed that the tumor was relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just assuming that Sam Harris was describing it accurately, which is a bad assumption.
Sure.
And yes, poor me for having to read Sam Harris ever. It's all Ben's fault. Thank you.
Fair enough. Well,
no, but a lot of people say, well, what happens if we give up free will? Then this and this and this and all these sorts of terrible things. Well,
yeah,
maybe that's the case, but
sure,
well.
Sure. Just because something it's not.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And like, I think I think that's a point that can be leveled against both believers in free will and skeptics about free will, is they're both guilty of a kind of, or at least very often they're guilty of a kind of optimism. So believers in free will often, I think, at least to some degree, are motivated to defend free will because they're worried about the bad consequences. But it's also interesting that every skeptic about free will is also really optimistic. They all think that if we get rid of free will, it's actually wonderful and beautiful, and it will make us all live in harmony. It's a beautiful thing. Like, everyone's super optimistic about it. No one's open to the possibility on either side that we might not have the kind of free will we think we have, and that might be bad news. So I think there is a general bias there on both sides.
Yeah, I am very, like, I totally agree with Chad that, like, it shouldn't be relevant, but I do, but this is also, like, that last thing that Ryan's mentioned is a pet peeve of mine, because people will often say, and that, actually, if we give up on belief in free will, then that's actually great, because we let go of all that judgmental, vengeful stuff, and we could have this, like, more compassionate approach to criminal justice and stuff like that. And I think that, for reasons that would probably take us way too far off track to get into, I think that's actually completely wrong. That if you think about what like, people will say things like, oh, it's like, you just think about, like, okay, sure, you might have to remove some violent offenders from society, but just think of it as, like, this morally neutral thing like quarantine. But I think that some of the ideas about criminal justice that are the most important, if you're going to have a sort of humane, compassionate view about that, like about the absolute rights of innocent people and stuff like that, it'd be very hard to make sense of on that view.
Yeah, I think it would actually. I think that would be a good another episode at some point. Is just to leave aside the question of whether we have free will, but, like, what would be the implications of no free will for ideas like criminal justice and things like that. Like, that's a whole other huge interesting. That's actually a more interesting topic to me lately. That would be awesome.
Yeah, no, we should do that, actually, especially because I think for, like, the last year or two, you've made occasional comments about having a view about punishment that I don't completely understand. So maybe this would the chance to go through it in enough depth that that I would get it. But
well, it would force me to, like, formulate it carefully and see what I actually think. So that would be good.
Well, the thing is, the more scientific stuff that you read, I read a lot about the brain, and the more stuff you read, the more and more impossible it seems that we could have free will. Well, just from a scientific point of view. And don't ask me for details. I'm just telling you.
Well, I was just going to ask in a super general way. Do you mean, like, the more impossible it is that we could have, like, indeterministic free will, or the more impossible?
No, it just seems impossible that everything is not, like, just laid out in advance.
Okay, but, like, everything being laid out in advance,
can we just?
Well, I was just going to say, the compatibilists will say,
compatibilists have always agreed that it probably is already laid out, and so compatibilists, since
Y'all just know what I mean, and just like act like normal people.
No, you just know what I mean and act like a normal person.
Yeah. I mean, like, say, like, David Hume would, like, if David Hume, like, were to appear today and look at neuroscience journals, he'd be like, yeah, of course I thought it was like this. Like, of course we're subject to all the same laws of physics that govern the rest of the universe. Like, this is what Hume was saying. I mean, and not just Hume, like, you can go back to, like, the Stoics, like, in ancient Greek philosophy, like, they thought we were no exceptions to the general laws that govern the rest of the universe. But they argued there was still a sense of freedom that's important, even if we are subject to the same laws that govern the rest of the universe. And so, I mean, I think brain science is filling in a lot of those details and showing yes, in fact, we are subject to the same kinds of causal laws that govern everything else. But that's consistent with also being rational agents who are governed by reasons. And now, yes, of course, it's still, some of us are going to be lucky to be those kinds of rational agents, and that's all going to be causally determined.
And of course, we don't have any choice of whether we're going to be rational agents.
Yeah.
But
that's all going to be a matter of pure luck. Like, some of us are going to be rational agents, some of us are not. And we should treat.
Nobody thinks that we have a choice of that. Like, nobody thinks, people who are like severely cognitively disabled, like, that it's their fault, that they're not, making free decisions.
Yeah. But those of us who have those general capacities, I think, again, this might be the whole separate criminal justice and responsibility episode, but I think there, at least to some degree, it can make sense to hold people answerable and accountable for their behavior, if they are reasons responsive agents who can engage in those kinds of practices.
Yeah, so that's the question, whether that's good enough.
No.
Okay.
Because you're responding to the reasons because you can't do anything else.
Okay, but that's not the question.
Of course, yeah. So there's the question of why I ended up as a reasons-responsive agent and why someone else didn't. But as long as I am that reasons-responsive agent, it makes sense to treat me as a reasons-responsive agent, part of which involves all of these responsibility practices, like holding me answerable for my behavior. Why did you do this? Why didn't you do this when you understood what you should have done? And in some cases, praising and blaming.
This just sounds like something like Zen Hammer or something earlier was like, well, isn't free will just a societal, political, practical construction?
Absolutely. I mean, in some sense, yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I do think that our praise and blame practices.
This is worth. I think it is worth just quickly slipping in a distinction here, because I think it depends what Sandhammer meant by that. Because if what he means by that is like there is like a consequentialist reason to act as if, then that's not.
No, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. But I do think so. What I mean by that, when I say yes, I think that in a very fundamental sense, these questions about free will and whether it's appropriate, whether people have the kind of free will that's appropriate to ground the appropriateness of praise and blame, is fundamentally a normative question. So to some sense, I mean, this will cash out in your views about ethics. So I mean, I guess if you're a radical relativist about ethics, then you might be a radical relativist about this too. But if you think there's any kind of, but I do think these are basically normative questions, like about the appropriateness of praise and blame. It's not purely an abstract metaphysical issue. It's going to be connected to our practices and how we connect with each other in society and in moral ways.
Yeah. So,
but I don't think that is truly possible for us to act like we don't believe in free will. I think no matter what we think about it, we're going to act the same as we do because that's just wired into us to act that way.
I'm not so sure about. I mean, at the very least, like at the social level, like a lot of our social practices are grounded in particular views of free will, I think. And we can question those. And in fact, I think some of our social practices are grounded in bad views of free will. Like some of our social practices are grounded in like a really radical libertarian view of free will, which is not plausible, which just like abstracts away from all social context and all individual limitations. And that can get you to like a really radical, like extremely punitive criminal justice system like we have here. So I do think these questions do make a difference. I don't think that like we have, and I actually, well, I mean, I'm not a sociologist, but at least some people who argue about this stuff argue that even if you look at different societies today, some societies have different views about free will, like the neoliberalism that's baked really deeply into American and British societies assumes one kind of view of free will. And then like more relational views of individual autonomy and free will produce different kinds of criminal justice systems in other societies. So I don't think we're necessarily locked into one view of free will.
I think we're locked into the view that we are fundamentally different from, if I hold up my pencil and I drop it, there's only one thing that can possibly happen. And I don't think we're ever going to see human beings as the equivalent of that.
We are importantly different from that, though.
The
free will can't respond to any reason. The pencil can't respond to any reasons for doing otherwise. A rational person can.
Yeah, the pencil isn't weighing and evaluating reasons for and against, falling or not falling, and
but all that's going on up here is just you're going through all these mental things, but you can only come out one way.
But that's not
that's right.
So what difference does it make that you're having?
Let me give you. So here's an example. This is my memory of an example from Dennett from a long time ago. So I might be getting the details wrong. But Dennett has lots of these colorful examples. So one example he gives is like, consider one rocket. Like we just launch a rocket straight out into space. Okay. And then that rocket's going to move according to the laws of physics. So that's like the pencil that you drop, right? So it's going to go near Mars and get pulled this way. It's going to go, then it's going to interact with Jupiter's gravitational field and get pulled this way. And then maybe it'll hit an asteroid, maybe it'll hit a star, whatever. It's just going to be pulled directly by the laws of physics. Now imagine another rocket that we put into space, but that one has a computer system on board and it has some cameras. And so it can like detect upcoming obstacles. And like if there's an asteroid in its way, it'll fire a booster rocket to move it out of the way of the asteroid so it won't collide with the asteroid. Now, both of these are completely deterministic systems, right? One's just being driven by the laws of physics. The other being driven by the laws of physics plus the very deterministic computer program. But the second thing still has a kind of freedom. It has an ability to respond to its environment. That the first thing
sounds like lunacy, Ryan.
Let me finish the sentence. The second one has an ability to respond to its environment. So when there's a reason to go to the right, it will go to the right. When there's a reason to go to the left, it will go to the left. The first rocket does not respond to reasons. It's going towards an asteroid. There's a good reason to go to the right, but it can't respond to that reason. It's not responsive to reason. Now, they're both deterministic, but the second one can respond to reasons, and that's an important kind of freedom that's still perfectly deterministic.
This just all seems to be like yeah, no politics. This just seems to be like, well, let's parse reasons, because I can give you a reason why the pencil is going to fall straight down. It responds to the gravity.
No. I'm talking about reasons in a normative sense, right? So like assuming the rocket has the goal of surviving, there's a good reason to go to the right. The first rocket can't respond to that reason. The second rocket can. All of that's consistent with the laws of physics. All of that's perfectly deterministic. But because the second thing has a mechanism that can respond to reasons, that's still a kind of freedom that the first rocket does not have.
Both those rockets sound the same to me.
Well, I mean, they're not going to be.
Okay,
they're not the same. The first rocket's going to die. The second one won't.
But
they're not the same.
So
those just sound like the same thing.
So I just wanted to go in. We had, I think you repeated it, the exact Zekel-Kleinhammer comment earlier, which was compatibilism is a practical, social, political solution to the free will question, not a philosophical solution. And so I wanted to push back against that, try to connect up a couple of threads here, because I think the question is very much a philosophical question. Yeah. And I think
normative questions are philosophical questions. Social, political, and practical questions are philosophical questions.
But in particular, like if practical, like the question here, and I think especially if you're a realist about morality, I think then it's sort of could be framed the most sharply, right? Which is it objectively correct to are some people objectively morally responsible for their actions? Yes or no? Right? Like that's the question. Because going back to what we were saying earlier about the semantic question about could have, right? Of course, there are lots of different senses of could have. I think in ordinary conversation, depending on the context, we use that phrase differently. But if the real question is, okay, there are lots of different ways you could be in control of your actions. Some of them are compatible with determinism, some of them aren't. But given determinism, could we in a deterministic universe be in control of our actions in whatever sense is relevant for moral responsibility? And if the sense that's relevant for moral responsibility is that we have to be free from deterministic physical laws, it can't be all laid out, then no, clearly, given, that's not compatible with determinism, because that would just be indeterminism. If the sense that's relevant to moral responsibility is that we're free in the sense that we're responsive to reasons, that we can understand and be moved by reasons for and against different courses of action, so that if there were reasons to act otherwise, we could be moved by those, then plausibly that is compatible with determinism, and that is compatible with everything that we constantly learn from science, filling in all those details that David Hume in the Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding says, yes, of course everything's determined. It's not even a question for him. He compares the idea that some things would not be determined to like a clock that, like in a village clock that sometimes stops working, and like this, the peasant might only be able to say sometimes it doesn't work, but the clockmaker could open it up and see exactly what the tiny little grain was that interfered with the clockwork. As we don't know what the grain is, but we know there always is a grain. So even no matter how much science fills in the details, if the question that's relevant for moral responsibility isn't are we free from determinism, but it's are we reasons responsive agents or something like that, then it would be compatible with determinism. So I think the real question is just what's the sense that matters for moral responsibility? Is this kind of account that Ryan's laying out, understanding reasons for and against, being able to weigh them against each other, deliberate, is that what's important for responsibility, for saying it's your fault, or is something else, something more metaphysical necessary for moral responsibility?
Yeah.
So your rocket has been programmed. That to me doesn't seem any different from just the first rocket.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be clear about that. The example is not meant to prove the rocket has free will.
Obviously.
I just want to show the example is just to illustrate a basic point that there is a kind of freedom the second rocket has that the first rocket does not.
It just doesn't seem like there's any difference there.
It has, like, in the moment. So like once both rockets have been out in outer space for 1 million years, and they're both approaching asteroids, and the people who have designed the rockets are long dead, the second rocket has an ability that the first rocket does not, which is to avoid the asteroid. And that's because it has a program that gives it the ability to respond to its environment and respond to reasons for going one way or the other.
I just don't.
So
the intuition that I'm supposed to be having here, or that the creator of this expects me to be having here, I'm not having.
Okay.
Yeah. So the intuition would just be that, so the one rocket has an ability the other rocket doesn't have. So there are different sense of control or ability that, that we can make those distinctions within a backdrop of assuming determinism.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea, is that even within the backdrop of determinism, we can still talk about degrees of self-control. Like the first rocket has no self-control.
Neither does the other one.
Well, but let me articulate. Like the first rocket is just on the trajectory it was set to go on the minute its rockets were ignited, and now it's just going the direction it's going in. The second rocket, 1 million years later, does have a degree of control over where it's going to go next. If there's a good reason to turn right, it will turn right. If there's a good reason to turn left, it will turn left. That's a kind of control over its trajectory that the first rocket does not have. The first rocket cannot respond to those reasons.
Now, let me just, I just want to, that I don't think that determinism and free will can exist together. That doesn't mean that I think we don't have free will.
So
this is, I mean, I have no idea whether.
Are you a libertarian? Did I not know this?
No, I don't know. I'm just saying if determinism is true, then there's no free will.
Wait,
So-
are you a libertarian? I might have to reevaluate things. I can be friends with a hard determinist, but I'm not sure about a libertarian.
Yeah. Just so everybody's watching this is clear, since not everybody comes from the same level of philosophy background, that isn't quite as much of fighting words as it might sound, right? This has nothing to do with libertarianism in that other much more unsavory sense.
Yeah, notice I am not yelling, so
Yeah.
so it's okay.
So
I love you even if you're a libertarian, Jen. I'm just kidding.
So libertarian in the free will sense is just being an incompatibilist who thinks determinism, no, free will, yes, rather than a free will, than a hard determinist who's an incompatibilist who thinks, free will, no, determinism, yes. There's also another position, which is hard incompatibilism, which says that whether determinism is true or not, we don't have free will. That like all options lead to no free will. That because it's either determinism, or to the extent that determinism is true, that must be because of like spots of randomness. Randomness don't help with free will, so just no free will all around. That's the hard.
Did you just say randomness don't help with free will? I think.
Did I?
I don't know. It sounded like.
All right. Too much country music. All right. So.
So at the beginning, long before Ryan got here, someone had asked, "What are people more likely to give up?" I don't want to get rid of seatbelt laws.
Not that kind of libertarian. Possibly not a libertarian.
Okay.
They infringe on your causal free will. No seatbelts.
So it was asked, do people tend to give up the idea of free will, or do they give up the determinism? And we were saying, well, it kind of depends on what sort of outside commitments that you have. So yes, I do believe that we have free will, but I don't believe that these two things can exist together.
So if it were really just like if like tomorrow some physicists came in with the results from the Large Hadron Collider and said, "Yep, we've proven definitively we've got the one unified theory of everything. Everything's causally determined." Would you give up the idea of free will?
No.
Okay, so you're a compatibilist. We agree.
No.
So you're a compatibilist. Awesome. Yay, compatibilism. Yay.
All right. I'm glad we all could agree at the end about the truth of compatibilism.
No, we don't agree.
Well, you said you wouldn't give up on free will then. So, I guess the compatible determinism.
No, I would have to believe that had gone wrong somewhere.
So your belief in free will is stronger than
in life. That free will does exist in reality. Aside from all this, aside from all this theoretical stuff, I think that it does exist in reality.
Okay.
But
that belief is stronger than your belief in whatever science might tell you.
Yes.
Okay.
Should say just for the sake of a complete tour of possible positions here, that there is, so we sort of said earlier, somebody asked about quantum randomness before Ryan came on, and we said that I think something at least the three of us all agree on, I thought, is that quantum randomness.
We're not compatibilists. I keep saying that. Go on.
Well, yeah, but then you're articulating the compatibilist.
No, I'm not.
Position.
I said that I would think things had gone wrong.
So
that was a mistaken theory, is what I said.
So the sky opens and God says, "Just so we're clear, determinism is true." Then still believe in free will or no?
All right, if God comes down and says compatibilism is true.
Well, that's not the question.
No. If
question-
God comes down and says, you know what, Einstein was right, no dice, it's all deterministic. I don't play dice with the universe.
And he doesn't tell us what that means about free will. You have to draw your own conclusions. Yeah. Then do you still believe in free will?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're a compatibilist.
No.
Yay.
Hey, compatibilism.
But I don't think that that's possible. I think that that's literally impossible. So that's like, well, what would you do if you squared the circle? Well, you know, you can give an answer, but it doesn't mean anything.
Also disagree with that, but I think logical counterfactuals are a subject for another day. I was just going to say, to complete the tour of positions, so there's libertarianism. So we talked about compatibilism, hard determinism, hard incompatibilism. So libertarianism tends to usually be the confusing one. It often feels super hand wavy. Like what's this thing that's like not determined and not random, but like how is it that your brain has to work for it to be true that you have free will? That tends to get a little mysterious. I think that
my brain does not work in the way that can figure that out.
Good.
And it was determined not to.
but it's still free to.
Still could, but it doesn't.
Yeah. So I would. But I think the most coherent version of libertarianism that I know about is Robert Kane, who thinks that the quantum randomness does help. So he has the view that if the way that because your brain is a quantum computer, there is this element of there's this non-deterministic element. So he talks about like situations in which you have, and I guess actually also a distinction worth making. You might be better at explaining this, Ryan, is that he doesn't. Even like part of what makes Kane's libertarianism slightly less ridiculous than most libertarians, and again, we're not talking about political libertarianism here. All political libertarianism is equally ridiculous. But part of what makes Kane's libertarianism less ridiculous than other kinds is that he doesn't actually think that in that like libertarian could do otherwise sense that like the 100 times a day that we're making decisions that we could do otherwise. He acknowledges that most of the time we're running on autopilot.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or I mean, not an autopilot, but like at least that for 99% of our decisions, the next decision is determined by what comes before. Like if we understood your neurochemistry, we could predict exactly what you were going to do. So yeah, the way he argues for it is he argues there are these key moments in your life where you have self-forming actions. How he defines a self-forming action is like these moments, like where you're forming a really formative life decision that will determine your character, and in which you have good reasons for both options, and in which you're genuinely torn between both options. So like if I think one of his examples is like a businesswoman who's on her way to like an important job interview or something, and she sees someone getting mugged, and so she could run. This is before cell phones, so she could like run, get to a payphone, and like call for help, and like try to save the person or do something, or she can just continue on to her meeting. And we assume she's torn between both options. She has reasons for both options. She feels pulled in both directions, and so what Kane hypothesizes is like in that moment, the brain ends up in this state of like indeterminacy, like where it's susceptible to the very slight quantum random fluctuations that would be happening, so that you could go in either direction. So it's possible in that moment she could help the person in the alley. It's also possible, consistent with the laws of physics and her brain chemistry, that she could go to the interview. And then I guess so. His point is that whatever she chooses to do, it won't be causally determined by what came before, but also whatever she chooses to do, it will be something that she had reasons to do. She will still be acting on reasons, and then that action will shape her character and have an influence on what she does in future similar situations. So it's this idea that in these key moments over time, we craft our character, and the crafting is indeterministic, but then the way we craft our character will determine our future actions.
Yeah, so it's like an analogy for understanding that view is like if we think that you're responsible for, like if you're drunk and you're driving recklessly, if we think that you're responsible for how you're driving at that moment, of course, given the conditions on the road and the chemical conditions in your brain, at that moment, you couldn't have driven any better than that. But because we can ultimately trace it back to some decision point earlier where you decided, not designated driver or to drink or whatever, then you're still responsible for, so because it's indirectly free because it traces back.
It traces back to some earlier self-forming action, some truly libertarian free choice.
Yeah. So, and I think there's something I always really liked about that view. Like, I think on a sort of like, I don't know, almost aesthetic level. Like, I mean, I think it does capture something about like how we think about, acting and being responsible for actions. But then like, I guess the place that I'd push back against it is like why it is that the alleged quantum randomness, there's a lot of speculation here, right? Like that this even is like the right interpretation of quantum physics, even is an indeterministic one, that indeterminism filters up to the level where it would impact decision making in the human brain, like huge assumptions. But like
and also that like it would leave it radically indeterminate, like when we should praise or blame people or not. Like we could be like, well,
right, unless you had some way of being sure about whether they'd had one of these self-forming actions.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, but I think the place where I'd like really push back the most against it is just like, okay, like, I find it plausible that there are, like, it might be important to like a fully worked out theory of responsibility that, that you could have like character forming decisions where you're pulled by different reasons, for and against different courses of action. But what does the quantum randomness really add to that?
Exactly. Yeah, that's my sticking point too. Yeah, I mean, I in a way, in a way, I like his account. It's almost kind of like an Aristotelian account of free will and responsibility. But like, I think you can do the whole thing in a deterministic system, and it works just as well. I'm not sure, like you said, I'm not sure what the quantum randomness adds to it.
Oh, so how's life feel as a compatibilist?
It's not funny.
I
already told you I had a headache.
Seems hilarious.
Welcome to the dark side, Jen. We have cookies.
I've missed a lot of the Astros games sitting here with you two fools.
Oh, fair enough. I would ask, since there were several questions in the comments about like economic determinism, and I think that's going to be a very different kind of claim.
Yeah.
Because I think that's going to like operate on the level of sorry, I'm messing up about how to put this, but I mean, I think that I think when you talk about economic determinism, you're talking about like why sort of general events happen that is in a way that's consistent with taking like even with thinking that like various individual actions, like are deterministic or not, right? That they have.
I think you could be a radical libertarian about free will and still worry about economic determinism.
Yeah, I think that's right.
By the way, the Astros have been around since 1962. So some players on one year's team did some bad things. I don't think that means we have to discard the entire franchise for that.
Well, that's an interesting. I think it's also a different kind of question, like whether, but
yeah, but
yeah, I kind of yeah.
I'm
like
just answering some people over
well,
here.
do you think? Let me ask you. This is really steering the conversation in a different direction, but do you ever take any kind of pride in anything that the Astros did in the past?
What do you mean?
Like, I don't know. Like me as a Red Wings fan,
I'm
like
proud
Yeah.
of.
I mean, do you ever like admire the Astros for things that happened? Like me
Well,
as a Red
yeah,
Wings
like,
fan,
I admire any good athlete. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So if you can take pride in your team for things that happened 70 years ago or whatever, can't there also be some shame on the team for things that happened 70 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that they didn't. It wasn't good, you know.
Yeah.
Everything that they are getting formally and informally, although I don't think people should be throwing real trash cans on the field because you could like hurt somebody. I think they what is that I said the other day? They bang the trash can, they bang the garbage cans, and now they got to wear it. Yep. But I'm not going to abandon an entire franchise because some people behaved poorly.
Fair enough.
Yes, they're responsible, but they don't need the death penalty.
They shouldn't be canceled, but they're responsible.
And there are a bunch of people on the team this year that were not on the team last year. So why can I not? Still, I'm a fan of the.
It's a kind of ship of Theseus thing to connect back to a philosophy of Friday.
Exactly.
Books that I'd recommend about compatibilism. Well, one of them certainly would be Ryan's dissertation. I mean, Jen, as you've heard, thinks that the underlying view is bullshit, but she still liked the book.
Yeah. Yeah. According to Michael Sloat, that's the thing you should read on recent to understand recent work in free will. He said that in 2013, which was a while ago now, but still.
Ben loves it when I say Ryan's dissertation is the only one I've ever
read.
I will reference Hillary Bach, and I think it has a really boring title. It's just like freedom and responsibility. But look for Hillary Bach. B-O-K is how you spell her last name. I read that when I was an undergraduate, and that book still has been really influential in my thinking about free will.
I'd also say I'm actually trying to remember which one's on the shelf, but I think John Martin Fisher, like everything, everything that he's written about this is worth reading.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well,
I would not talk to kids about free will.
Okay, Johnny, Susie. So let's start out with let's start out with physics. Do you know what physics is?
Right, here's a pencil. We're gonna drop it. Now, how are you different from this pencil?
How are you like the pencil? How are you different from the pencil? Kleinhammer has a view about the Astros and cheating. And again, this is the sort of thing that oftentimes free will skeptics will play up, is that you have this more like enlightened approach to these subjects. If you stop thinking that anybody's like literally at fault,
they bang the garbage can, they gotta wear it.
This on the therapeutic response to criminal justice. A future movie episode should be about A Clockwork Orange.
Oh yeah, totally. Yep, that'd be good for that.
Yep.
Which is also, I think, by the way, a good. Yeah, I think that's a good illustration of why. And I realize that most times when I say this, people are super skeptical because they're so used to hearing, like they're so used to associating belief in free will with people who believe like really like nasty, punitive, retributive things, and who think that it's, you should, criminals, should just be locked up and have the key thrown away because what they did is their fault, and maybe even minimum wage workers, it's their fault they didn't go back to school, and shit like that. That people are so used to hearing these like horrifying views associated with free will that I know it's like a very uphill battle for me to try to convince people that there's actually a connection that runs in the other direction. But I think that the Clockwork Orange thing is like a nice, vivid example of how the connection could run in the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Hey, Lance. It's the guy who hosts the Surfs.
Oh, nice. I've never watched your podcast. I probably heard it. Is it a watch or is it just a listen?
It's a watch.
Okay, well, I'm sure I've heard it in the car while I've been reading a book. So, yeah.
I have met Ben's wife before, and she's pretty cool. In spite of the fact that she's a libertarian.
Okay. Yeah. And you've known me for like 15 years.
So Lance just comes on. He thinks you're going to be a libertarian in the bad sense.
No, she's not a libertarian in the bad political sense. Just in the almost as bad free will sense.
Well, then I get confused again, but that's okay.
I'll explain it to you later, dear.
So, if you think that determinism is false, and we do have free will, and that if determinism were true, we would not have free will, that would be libertarianism, no?
I said, oh my God. Okay. What I said.
Oh wait, you're a compatibilist. Never mind. That's right. You're a compatibilist. We brought you around. We all agree compatibilism is true.
Is that I believe we have free will in lieu of my religious convictions. But the idea that free will and determinism can exist together does not make sense to me. That's what I said.
All right, that still sounds like free will libertarianism.
Like, I think that's how I define libertarianism to my students. If you believe in free will and you believe free will is not compatible with determinism, then you are libertarian.
Well, I think you can have some types of beliefs over here and some other types of beliefs over here. I think you can compartmentalize.
Yeah. So kicking Oliver off the Patreon today. It's too bad. He was one of the most active members, but he's got to go.
That's a shame.
Oh, fair enough. Well, look, I think
that I'm not getting into any religious conversations over there. So
yeah. Could perhaps someday in season 2 there could be some philosophy of religion stuff, but that would have to wait for then. This is the very last bit of season 1 of Give Them an Argument, because I was thinking that we might be doing a debate breakdown on Sunday, but I have another commitment at that time, so we will not be. So this is all she wrote. I
will be back in season 2.
Yes.
I might even do a movie thing. Well, if we do a bug fight, I will definitely do a movie.
You've got to join us for a Clockwork Orange. Come on.
But you might have a bunch of people on there.
No, we'd keep it relatively small.
Okay. So like 3 of us and Forrest?
Yeah. So yeah, it's so there is going to be, in the couple weeks between seasons, there is still going to be lots of stuff on the channel. We have many unreleased clips, especially because we're only just now starting to clip the debate breakdowns. We've also got lots of patron episodes. Probably at least a few of those will be unlocked during the break. And also I'm interviewing Glenn Greenwald tomorrow afternoon, so that'll be released. Full version will at least be released to patrons over the break. And then in a couple weeks we're going to be back with season 2. Mostly the same, but improved in some ways. There's going to be a post-game segment on Monday nights. I think we just decided that. Going to shift this.
Wait, so it's going to go on longer?
Not exactly.
So dinner is going to be like 1 in the morning on Mondays.
Yeah. There's going to we're going to shift all of the starting times to 8 to be a little bit more West Coast friendly.
So dinner really is going to be
no, it's going to be at 2 or 3 in the morning, but it's and there will be various other the Second Amendment debate was on the Vanguard podcast that already happened. You can check that out there. But anyway, so lots of exciting stuff coming up for season 2. Stay tuned for that. Still going to be lots of content in between the regular episodes and live streams in the next couple of the next couple of weeks. And,
oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just give the channel to Kale and Andrew for an evening, and they can just talk The Shining Part 2.
All the stuff that they didn't get to, and the Shining Part 1 in the 3.5 hours of that.
Yeah.
In season 2. But yeah, it's going to be exciting. We'll also say that I think if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, I think we're up to something like 12,978
I've subscribed, and I don't even watch his videos.
Subs.
I've subscribed, and I watch the ones I'm in. So
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And occasionally other ones. I watch the ones you're in too, Jen.
So it would make me very happy if we could get up to 13,000. By the time we got back from break. So if you have not
subscribe, so he'll stop being mean to me.
Yeah. The meanness to Jen will end when we get up to 13,000 subs. So please do consider doing that. Tons of stuff about the twins and in The Shinings Part 2, 3, 4, and 5 that Kale and Andy are going to do. I think I actually want them to come to both come back on when we do like Mulholland Drive or something.
Oh God, yes, yeah.
And thank you so much for the super chat, Charles. So glad you're enjoying this. This has been a good thing to do. Break up the regular political programming a little bit. So
for sure,
much much appreciated. I will see all of you guys in season 2. Left is best.
Team Snoopy forever.
Bye.